Back to class. In today's material demonstration, we're going to be talking about how to glue using two basic types of artisan glues, and we're going to be demonstrating them on a variety of different papers. So in front of you, I have got a couple things that you might need for gluing paper. I have got some paper shreds here, so this will be simulating some of my papers that I will be gluing. This is actually Arches paper. This is a great quality paper for drawing, and it will act as our kind of heavier paper, similar to a watercolor. Arches cover is a primarily either a drawing paper or a printmaking paper. So I like to draw with it quite a bit, and I have a bundle of it around in my studio. And this will kind of simulate, like I said, what our watercolor paper will look like when we glue it. So some good crafting tips we're going to talk about when using glue with a paper like this. We're also going to be talking about a lighter pound drawing paper, which is our Strathmore drawing paper. This is about 80 pounds, so it's a good quality drawing paper. It'll simulate probably a lot of other drawing papers that you'll find out there by Canson and other brands. So this will be used quite a bit in the classroom, and we'll simulate how we will work with this type of paper when gluing. We will also be talking about Bristol board. Bristol board is going to be a heavier pound paper similar to our Arches cover. It's about 100 pounds, and this is the smooth surface Bristol board. Smooth surface Bristol board is really recommended for any type of pen, ink, or marker type of situations. You can use it for some other things too, such as graphite and doing some detailed work with graphite. Obviously pen and pencil too, but it's really preferred for any kind of pen and ink material. We will be working with Bristol board, the vellum surface. Vellum just has a little bit more of a tooth to the surface and is great for a variety of different drawing materials such as graphite, charcoal, pastels, any type of pencil work, and color pencils. So it's a great board, and we will be using it quite a bit in any type of drawing class. I've also got some kind of scrap paper here. This is just 8.5 by 11 printer paper that I'll be using. This paper is going to be placed under my drawings or my paper that I'll be gluing. This is going to be used as my kind of craft surface to make sure that I'm protecting my background. You can also use other things such as a towel. I recommended a towel to be used quite a bit in our class. So if you have some towels, especially if you are working with larger paper, I recommend working with any larger paper if you have a big cutting mat or a big table to work on, or using it on the floor if you're attaching multiple sheets of larger paper. So you might just want to think about that too. I'm going to be, just like I said, using this 8.5 by 11 computer paper for my crafting surface. I've also got some other things. Cutting, you might have to cut some of your drawings down, so I've got an X-Acto knife just in case. I'm not sure if I'll be using that in this demo, but this might be helpful for you, so that's why I recommend it here. Also, a good pencil for making any measurements that you might have to do on the back of your paper, and then also a good white eraser. Be careful when you use this in tandem with the glue. I would not recommend ever mixing a eraser with glue, because it will scuff up and it will leave the ugliest marks on your page. So this will be used very cautiously and very deliberately when used, or if used at all. All right, in addition to that paper, I've got a ruler just in case we need to cut anything or measure anything, so that might be also something helpful for you. I'm not sure if I'm going to totally be using that in this demo, but this will be helpful for you using it in tandem if you have to cut something down with your X-Acto knife, okay? I'm going to put this off to the side. Things that I couldn't fit in the frame, such as external things that I might use with my glue, are going to include a brush. I've got two here. I've got a smaller gluing brush since I'll be doing smaller detailed work. I have an old kind of brush that I'll be using there. If you are using a larger piece of paper such as 18 by 24 and stitching those together or gluing those together, I would recommend maybe a larger brush too, just so you don't have to do these little tiny dabs over and over and over again. I also have a little cup for water and some kind of board or some kind of area where you can place some glue on a sheet. This is me just kind of dabbing some glue around, making sure that the glue was right because it was old. So I wanted to make sure my glue was okay. Or you could just use an old piece of scrap paper to put some glue on. I would recommend, if you are going to use an old piece of scrap paper, that it is a heavier kind of paper so the paper doesn't buckle, tear, or rip underneath. So this is a really heavy piece of Bristol board, so it's really strong and it's not going to ripple after 30 minutes of having glue under it. All right, so let's go ahead and start talking about glue. So we've got two primary glues that I'm going to illustrate today. That is first a glue stick and then our tacky glue. Both of these are great products for any type of art project that you may have, or any type of crafting materials when you want to go to glue. These are pretty much staple products, I think, that every artist should have in their arsenal. And they're pretty well known and well used in the art worlds. Tacky glue is an acid-free glue. It's also non-toxic. And it dries clear, so it's a really good glue in general, and it's really useful for a lot of artists. That and the fact, like I said, it's got a neutral pH, so it's going to be archival and not damage our papers. So it's a great product to have. I particularly love this brand in general, so I recommend this for my drawing classes or when anybody needs to glue pieces of paper together. So that's going to be our first glue. I'm going to set that to the side. Our second glue is a glue stick. This is actually a really great brand of glue stick. This dries clear. It's actually a very strong glue. Low moisture, so this is going to be for our lighter or delicate papers. It's really great for collaging too, or just kind of sticking something together really quickly. So this dries really quick, and like I said, it does have a really strong type of glue bond that it creates. So I highly recommend this. It's also solvent free, so it's going to add some additional kind of archivability to your images, and it's not going to tear down our paper terribly. So that could be a useful glue too. So we're just going to talk about those two glues today and those particular papers. Now, of course, there is a variety and retinue of papers available to you through a variety of different retailers, and there's a lot of different wonderful papers out there. We're not going to obviously talk about or go through all of them today. And there's also quite a bit of glues that you can use when gluing pages together. Obviously, we can't talk about those all in one video, so we're just going to keep it simple, and we're just going to talk about these main two glue types today. All right, so first things first, I'm going to go ahead and think about my area that I'm going to craft on. And I'm going to have right here, as you can see, I've got a mat. I'm going to try to keep this mat pretty clean because I do a lot of cutting here and a lot of other stuff. As you can see, I've gotten some paint splatters on it in the past, but I do try to keep it pretty clean. So I'm going to go ahead and put a piece of crafting paper on here, aka my printer paper, and just lay that on the table. So I always recommend having some type of crafting paper, junk paper, under anything that you glue. This is going to do two things. It's going to keep your background safe and protected, and then it's also going to keep your drawing safe and protected. So when you inevitably get glue on this surface, you just wad it up in a ball, throw it in the recycling bin, and then get a new piece of paper and start the process over again. Okay, so it's going to be a really good tip, first off, to just start with a piece of paper under it. So I'm actually going to start with my Arches cover paper. I'm going to be gluing two sheets together, and these are going to be two awkward sheets. Excuse my arm in the middle of the frame. I'm just grabbing some paper. So I'm going to grab these two pieces of paper, and I'm going to actually glue them together like so. So this is really going to simulate some kind of complex drawing strategies that you might approach, such as our around the room drawing, where you might have awkward pieces or kind of interesting shaped pieces that have to be fit together. So this is going to be simulate that experience pretty well for us. I've decided to kind of orient my paper like this. I would recommend, too, making sure that your drawing is fully completed. So here's one of my example pieces. This is an abstract drawing that I did a couple weeks back, but as you can see, I have glued it together, and I used my tacky glue in this instance. It's pretty strong. It's not going anywhere. I'm pulling on it pretty hard right now, and it's not going anywhere. So I just put this under some weight, but essentially we're going to be making a very similar situation, yeah. So I would recommend having a drawing completely done before you start this process. I'm just going to show you on white paper because I'm going to show you on white paper, and that's what I have right now. I don't have any drawings that I need to glue for Arches cover, but I would always recommend making sure that you do this as your final process, right? So make sure you have the drawing completely done and finished, and then do the gluing component, okay? It's just going to help for crafting qualities in the future, especially too if you have a lot of delicate pieces that are all stitched together and it's very long. It can rip or tear or be prone to ripping and tearing, so sometimes it's better to finish the drawing then stitch it together later. So that's another really good crafting tip. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my drawing a little bit off to the side, and I'm going to go ahead and get some water and some glue. I'm going to put my little cap here down, and I'm going to fill this up with some just good old tacky glue. Most tacky glues will have this little plastic thing that you have to tear off or cut off, so make sure you have some scissors available to do that, or an X-Acto knife ready to chop that little bad boy off. Alright, I've got some glue down, I've got some brush and water here. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that there's not a lot of water on my brush. Now remember, we're not necessarily working with any Arches cover this go around. At least I don't think we are. I can't remember if we are or not, but we are working with a watercolor paper. So That's going to be really important, and I have my paper backwards, so that's good too. So we, we will be working with a watercolor paper, so you want to make sure that when you go to use any kind of watercolor paper, it's going to be a much more adaptive paper. It's going to be a stronger paper, a heavier weighted paper. So you want to make sure that you're using a glue that has a stronger adhesion, right? You want to use something that's got more body to it. Something like our tacky glue is going to be able to really hold up and glue together those paper fibers really well. So I always recommend anything over 100 pounds using a heavier duty glue such as tacky glue. You can also use things like Yes Paste too. We're not going to get into Yes Paste today, but that is also a side note too. If you have used it before, yay you. But anything over 100 pounds, you probably should stick with a tacky glue or something a little bit heavier, just because it's going to, you know, especially if you're working with larger pages too, you're going to want something to support that weight. Also, you need something that's going to bind those paper fibers in a really strong way. So that's why we're using our tacky glue right now. Anything under 100 pounds, that's where it becomes a little suspect. You might want to think about switching over to your glue stick or a glue that has less moisture in it. But sometimes that can be a little bit up to question too, just depending on the humidity in the room as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and glue this together. Usually for anything that you're trying to glue together, I say, 1/4 to 1/2 is probably good. If you're working with larger sheets, I might recommend gluing about 1/2 of an inch into the paper. So if you can see this right here, right, that's about 1/2 an inch that I'll be gluing. So this is what I might recommend if you have larger sheets of paper or you're working with heavier paper. You just want to make sure there's more surface area for that glue to bind with the paper and really seal together to make a strong hold. That's just something that's kind of a crafting tip that'll really help you in the future, especially when you are working with larger pieces of paper. What I'm doing now is I'm going to flip it upside down, so this is the back of the image. This is just a little crafting tip, and you can do this, or if you're really good with just registering it through your eyes, go ahead and feel free to do that. If you want to make sure that you're matching up your page perfectly though, go ahead and mark little notches into your paper with just your pencil, and make sure that you can see that on the back of the page, so you know what area to glue, right? And make sure you know the front from back so you don't have any issues. Usually there will be a watermark on most papers, unless you're buying it in a pad, then usually they don't have any watermarks. But on paper that's kind of you're buying loose leaf, there will be some kind of watermark. So make sure that you kind of keep that aware. I'm just kind of taking my finger along and feeling for the back edge of the paper. This is a thicker paper, so I'm able to do that here. Usually with lighter weight papers, you can see it, or it might be a little transparent, so that's where you can make the back of your mark. Now, of course, this is on the back side of my paper, so I'm just going to kind of rotate my page back and forth to make sure I'm gluing the correct areas. All right, and then I'm just going to go ahead and load up my brush with a little bit of glue. All right, I'm going to go ahead and paint this down. I'm going to do some flips. All right, and I'm just going to create a nice little bead. So the big thing with gluing, and the reason I recommend using a brush, is that people often put too much glue down on one page. This could be really devastating to a drawing, especially after you've spent so many hours crafting it and making it beautiful and perfect and everything that you want. So I always recommend really making sure that you use a brush because you can apply the right amount of glue and make sure that it's fully incorporated to the page. So the nice thing about the brush is that it's really going to push down on those areas of the paper, really saturating the paper pulp and creating a really strong bond, wetting the paper. The really nice thing is you can work directly up to that border, both on the edge of the page and right up to the line in which you're attaching. So this will give you not only a really strong kind of surface area that's really well hydrated with glue, but also it allows you to cover all of the area. So it's a really strong seal on all sides. And as you can see, I'm getting really specific here. And I'm making sure that I don't have any like beads of glue or any gunk of glue, so I'm really working it into the page, and I'm making sure that I don't apply too much excess glue. And when I do apply some, I make sure that I work it in and then I work it out of the page. Once again, this is just good crafting tips. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and adhere this. So this is the back of the page. I can see my marks. I'm going to work it right up to that edge. I'm going to double check it, make sure it looks right on this side. Alright. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead, since there's some glue here, I'm going to go ahead and pull this over a little bit, move my glue brush, and I'm just going to run my thumb along that edge. Now, this is a really key point. Make sure before you touch your paper that your hands are extremely clean. Any type of glue that is left over on residue on the back or front of the page will hold material like I don't even know what. It is like crazy. It's like a sponge, it smears, it's gunked, and no matter how much erasing you do, it will always be there. It will forever be unclean, okay? So please make sure that you're paying real particular attention when you're touching your drawing with your hands, and make sure your hands are really clean, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and put this under weight now. Whenever you glue a surface down with paper, just to avoid any type of buckling or the paper lifting off, you always want to make sure it's underweight. This looks pretty good. I've checked it on both sides. I felt to make sure that there's no glue on either the front or back surfaces. All it needs now is just some heavy weight. As college students, you guys should have plenty of heavy textbooks. This is my really big Bible book that I'm going to be using today. Also a killer book if you want to read something good. It's kind of like all of the symbols ever used in art, and it's like an encyclopedia. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on the floor. Make sure your floor is clean if you're working on it. I shouldn't need to say that, but just in case you forget, make sure that you wipe up any scraps or any dog food that's laying around, so you don't stain your paper with oils. Alright, so that was a good demonstration for Arches Cover. Now Arches Cover, as I mentioned again, is a great watercolor paper, a great heavy-duty drawing paper, and a good printmaking paper. So it's going to kind of suffice for maybe a watercolor paper that we might use in this class. So turn back to this and think about this video in the future. Alright, the next thing we are going to be gluing is we are going to be gluing a drawing paper. So once again, this is going to be a really nice kind of 80-pound Strathmore drawing paper. You should have seen this in your careers here at college. So this is going to be a really common paper that you will draw with. You should have plenty of experience with using this. And this is going to be this paper. So we're going to essentially be making something similar to this. And we're going to talk about how to adhere this, some rules that you want to think about, and also some good common crafting tips for it, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and pull out a piece of paper here, and I'm going to cut it down actually. So we are going to use our cutting utensils today. Got a piece of paper here. And I'm actually just going to cut this down a little bit. So I'm going to make a smaller image for us again. And I'm going to cut it this way so I can see it well. I'm going to line this up. And I'm just going to make a little bit of an arbitrary measurement, but for this video it will work. Oh my gosh, if I can do it. Hold on, there we go. That was hard. I can't see, hold on. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and we will continue in a second. Alright, I figured it out. We got it. Awkward angles. Okay, alright, I'm going to go ahead and cut this like I said. I'll move some paper to the left. And I'm just going to go ahead and cut it down here. I'm going to actually just glue this back together in this shape. So some of you might have some nice even shapes that you need to match up. So we're going to go ahead and do that too. Alright, now like I said too, if you are working with larger pieces of paper, you will want to make sure that you're giving us ample amount of coverage and surface area in your gluing space. So just think about a ½ inch maybe. Like I said, 1/4 of an inch can work fine too, especially in smaller zones. Try to keep it even though, if you are using a type of inch or measurement system, just try to keep it even so it has good craft all the way around. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and glue these two pieces of paper together. Now, this is when we get into some kind of tricky business. So we're at 80 pounds here. So this is a standard kind of drawing paper. Like I said, we've worked with Strathmore probably before as an artist, so you should be pretty comfortable with this drawing paper by now. Whenever we get below the 100-pound marker, right, that's when we have to really start thinking about gluing options, because our papers at this level are really not supported with any type of water dense glue or glue that has a particular amount of water in it. Okay, so this is where we might want to think about switching to a glue stick. All right, so like I recommended, this brand in particular I think is pretty good. It's a really strong glue. It's got low moisture content, and it's actually pretty decent in terms of like pH. So I do recommend this glue, but this is just something to consider. I have glued Strathmore drawing paper together with tacky glue before, and it's been fine. But also too, there's been times where I have used tacky glue on this Strathmore 80-pound paper, and it has totally rippled and just not been a pretty looking drawing. So just to be safe, I end up usually turning to a glue stick, just to be a little careful. If you really are noticing that this is not strong enough, then switch over to the tacky glue. But in my personal experience, I've just noticed a lot of rippling whenever I use the tacky glue with anything under 100 pounds. So that's kind of like a general rule. Like I said, that's not an always rule, but it's a general rule that I have. And I kind of recommend that for most people. Just because I've noticed in the past, like I said, when I've done it, it's just not worked out the way I thought it would, or I've had rippling that I just couldn't really get out with pressing it or ironing it down. So once again, this is the back of my paper. I'm going to just put a little B for back just in case. And I'm going to use my brush, my gluing brush. Now obviously you might want to switch to a larger brush when working with larger paper, because otherwise you'll be dabbing forever and your glue will dry out. So that brings up a good point too. You want to make sure when you are working with your glue that you are working pretty quick. You don't want to be meandering around. I'm going to go ahead and glue two sections of this. So I'm going to use our Strathmore drawing paper with our tacky glue, and we're going to see how that does here. And then I'm going to go ahead and use our glue stick with a second section, and we're just going to see how that does. I want to do this little experiment for you guys, and like I said, this will be smaller, so it might not have a big effect, but once we get larger, you might have more problems with it. So we're just going to go ahead and glue one side this time. So far I don't see any big rippling issues. I am seeing a little bit of bowing already, so that's maybe not the best. And this is, like I said, maybe only a 2-inch, 3-inch kind of paper, so once you get into that 18 by 24, you might have a lot more ripples happening. I can start to see maybe some just starting of rippling happening. So this might be a glue that maybe you stay clear of. We'll see how this one turns out. I'm going to put this under pressure too. Even if you are using a glue stick, I always recommend any type of glued paper. You want to secure that bond and make sure that it's drying and adhering with weight on top of it. So I'm going to go ahead and put this under weight. We're going to check this at the end of the video and see how this turned out. Alright, we're going to go ahead and cut down a second little strip, and we're going to see how our glue stick does. Now like I said, that is just general information. I have noticed in the past when I have used, especially on larger sheets of paper, that there has been issues with a tacky glue. So usually at the 100-pound mark, that's usually when I start to switch glues. I'm going to go ahead and cut this down. Move that off to the side. Okay, and let's recreate the same experiment, and we'll go ahead and use our glue stick. And I'll be curious to see how that little test example I did turned out. And we'll go ahead and we'll get a new piece of paper here. Sorry for my arm in the middle of the frame. Go ahead and make sure this is the front facing side, flip it over. Let's keep it consistent. Why not? Remember, I'm going for about 1/2 of an inch. This is pretty transparent at this point, at least I can see the back, so I'm just going to go ahead and mark it that way. And I'm actually just going to use my glue stick and run it across that seam. The great thing about glue sticks is they're really easy to use, and it's really hard to put too much glue on the paper with a glue stick. So, okay. I'm just quickly looking up and checking to see that I'm not going over those marks. Okay, that looks good. I'm gonna go ahead and apply this. You notice I got some glue down, so I'm gonna just shift my paper over real quick. Line that up pretty good. Perfect. Looking good. Alright. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put that down. Here I notice that there's less rippling actually happening. I do see a little pocket that I'm just gonna have to correct real fast. But there is less rippling happening in this image already, so I think this might actually turn out better, especially from a larger scale. With anything that you're gluing, like I said, make sure that it goes under weight immediately. I'm gonna put this under my paper. Once again, I'm gonna check all those sides to make sure there's no gross any glue buggers happening. And we're gonna mark this too, just to make sure, so we'll know the difference, okay? Okay, and our last paper, we're going to demonstrate Bristol board. So Bristol board, we're going to turn back once again to our tacky glue. So I'm going to go ahead and get some Bristol board for us. I've got some drawings around here, so just give me a second. All the papers around. And I'm just going to cut this little guy off, or cut this little paper down. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to glue this little situation together. Okay, so I've got a start of a drawing here. Now, like I said, whenever doing a drawing and you're gluing things together, always make sure that your drawings are done on both pages before you glue it together. It's just a general crafting tip that'll help you along. I've actually got a little bit of glue on my paper, so I'm going to chop that I did get on my drawings, and I'm going to switch my paper out real quick. So this is a really nice thing too if you have some junk paper lying around. It's really helpful, especially when you come to gluing, because gluing, it's just like no matter what, it just gets all over the place. Alright, so I've got my little tomato. Oh, and look, I even signed it. I never do that. That's exciting. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna follow that I'm gonna follow that half ratio, half an inch, and I'm gonna make sure this is on the back. I never do that. That's amazing. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and take my glue brush, some water. I'm gonna clean off my brush, make sure there's less water on it. Grab my glue, load it up. I've got plenty of glue on my brush now. It's well mixed. And I'm going to go ahead and paint. Once again, I'm just starting on the outside and I'm working right up to that line. You usually want to work on the outside towards the inside, just as a crafting tip. Once again, that's just going to help you make sure that you don't over glue a situation or your paper, or that you're not going over your area. I'm going to flip my paper over because remember this is the front. And then I'm just going to arbitrarily kind of put it down on the edge here. I've got a whole bunch of glue there, so we're going to have to be careful of that. Alright, I'll just use some of that, why not? Okay, and then I'll just go ahead and make sure that my sides are nice and evenly covered. And I'm just going to go ahead and go over to the side here and glue that. Because whoa, I made a mess. Okay, here we go. That's what I want. Alright, and I'll just shimmy that back over. The nice thing about working with tacky glue is that it's a little bit forgiving. You can kind of just shimmy your drawing back in place just by moving it a little bit. The glue stick is a little bit less forgiving because it glues, or glue just dries so quickly. Alright, great. I'm going to go ahead and check and make sure there's no glue on the back of my image. Make sure my hands are clean too, right? And we're all set. So I've got to go ahead and now just put this under some weight. Like always, make sure that you have your images under weight. For drying time, usually a minimum of 2 hours under weight for any type of glued paper is going to be the kind of minimum for time that you want it to be under weight. It can go anywhere from 5 hours to 10 hours to 24 hours, just depending upon humidity in the room, the heat, the temperature, right? All of this kind of factors kind of play into how your glue is setting up and bonding to the paper. So it really is going to depend on your particular situation and environment. So just check it as you go. But like I said, usually 2 hours is the minimum. So just remember that when you're working. Let's go ahead and check our little paper experiment and see how it worked. So once again, this is that drawing paper. This is the 80-pound Strathmore drawing paper, and we used a glue stick on one, and we used our tacky glue on the other. So this was our glue stick. I know that because I marked it up here, and this is our regular tacky glue. As I can see right now, there's not a huge difference. This is a smaller paper, so that could be it too. Just to be safe, I might recommend using that glue stick on larger paper. But you never know. Maybe my environment right now is conducive for this type of gluing. I'm really not seeing a lot of warping. This has had some time to sit under that weight while it's dried, so I'm not seeing a lot of rippling. But just to be sure, you might want to do some tests on your own before you glue. So that's going to kind of conclude this video. I don't see any ripples at all on our glue stick version. So that's going to conclude our gluing demo video. Hopefully this helped. We will have some other kind of issues, or if any other kind of issues pop up in the future with gluing, we can always talk about it in the classroom. So hopefully you have a basic knowledge on gluing, at least for 2 different glues, and you'll have a general rule about that 100-pound kind of paper weight, right? So maybe think about lowering your water type of glue or water amount in your glue, and think about using a glue stick or tacky glue when you get into different types of paper weights. Okay, so thank you so much. You have a great day, and happy gluing.